This is Bigfoot Crossroads. I'm Matt, and man, it's been a while. We had a crazy Oklahoma storm. No tornado, but we still had, they measured 117 mile per hour winds in my neighborhood. It was crazy. I thought I was going to die. We got in the closet, but we're okay. The problem was internet was out for about 10 days. So that kind of puts a damper on things like podcasting. But like I said, I'm back, and I am joined by my number one ace in the hole, but don't call him an ace hole, the host of Bigfoot Club, Mr. Robert Jesse Dominguez. How you doing, man?
Robert Dominguez in the house.
Robert Dominguez. What's up, brother?
Man, I was kind of scared for you for a little bit whenever that was going on with you.
Crazy stuff, man. Crazy stuff.
Let's just say, okay, the job that I'm working at now, it has to do with insurance. And I think I did like 10 claims in Oklahoma.
Wow.
And it was all like damage, like trees falling on a porch falling on a car, blah, blah, blah. So
Right.
It's crazy. I said, man. And like when that happened with you, I said, okay, that makes sense. So
yeah, we had to camp out at my mother-in-law's house. I slept on the couch for about 3 or 4 days. She had a generator hooked up to her house. So that was nice, but yeah, man, it sucked. It sucked. And
Yeah.
it looked like a war zone, man. The next morning, go outside during the daylight hours and, huge trees uprooted, like you're saying, trees on cars on porches, the whole nine.
I was going to ask you, when I was living in Tulsa back in like 2010, 2011, there was like a 50-mile radius around Tulsa where there's like Bigfoot activity.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think a storm like this causes any kind of disruption, like in their hunter-gatherer stuff or their movement? Have you ever gotten like any reports about that?
So there's this guy that used to frequent the Bigfoot community named Bill Green.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill Green, there used to be a lot of live podcasts about Bigfoot that had actual call-in numbers and would take live guests. And Bill Green would call in on every show. He used to call in on the old show that I used to do, every single episode. And Bill Green would always ask the same question. And it was always, what do Bigfoot do in bad weather? He was more interested in that one topic than anything. And this past, event, I'm going to be honest, it was the first time that I ever thought about, Bill Green and that question from years ago. They got to be affected by this,
Yeah.
not just, seasonal weather, it gets really hot here. Then you have ice storms and everything else in the winter sometimes. But we also have tornadoes, and we also have these crazy storms like this that I would imagine that would at least temporarily disrupt an ecosystem. If not permanently, it might cause them to have to move out of an area and find a new location. And I think whenever that sort of thing happens, you might have kind of an uptick in sightings in an area, or maybe even along, a mini migrational path as different people see them, trying to move into a new area.
That stuff always hits home with me whenever I see like a mudslide in the West Coast, or I see a forest fire over in Australia. Just stuff like that in general always made me think that. I don't know why. I've always been curious because like some people say that animals like elephants and stuff, they can sense when bad weather's coming and they take off. So I was wondering, wonder if anybody ever noticed that or documented it or even talked about it on the podcast. So, but Bill Green, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the South, we have a lot of floods, and a lot of flooding happens in areas where there's Bigfoot activity reported. But I mean, whenever an area gets flooded like that, or a tornado goes through an area or something, it doesn't just destroy all the wildlife in the area. I'm sure there's some loss, but animals have that sixth sense about it, and they hunker down and they find places to hide and they survive, somehow. And I would just imagine that Bigfoot does the same thing.
Man, that's crazy. Sorry to start out the show that way.
No, it's cool, man. There was that story about a wildfire in, I want to say, New Mexico, maybe, where supposedly, according to the anonymous witness that came forward, a Bigfoot was injured in the fire, and they ended up helping it, the emergency crew there. And there was paramedics brought in and an actual veterinarian because they didn't have any idea what to do. And I guess they loaded this thing up in a utility truck to disguise it as they drove it out of the area. They didn't want to run it out in an ambulance or anything because that would attract the media's attention. But this guy gave like a detailed description of the thing. He talks about all these witnesses and how they all had to sign NDAs and stuff, and all their jobs were threatened and everything. Don't you dare tell anybody about this. But that's a pretty crazy story. But part of me kind of believes it, man. I think it might be true. Like, have you heard about that?
I have not, but I was wondering, was it on like a res or something, or close to a reservation?
There was a big fire in the Four Corners region a while back, and I don't know if that was the one or if it was a fire in California. And I know DJ is going to listen to this and he's screaming at the top of his lungs right now because I should know the name and everything else. He talks about it all the time. He's asked me about it. I've listened to podcasts about it at his request. But yeah, man, I don't know. Maybe, you hear these stories every once in a while, very rarely, but every now and then, about an injured Bigfoot or something seeking the help of humans.
Yeah.
Do you think they would really do that, risk themselves like that to get help if they absolutely had to?
I would think that's why I asked that question. If it was in the res, because that group those groups are normally like well tight and they don't have any outsiders in there. So if it was in the reservation, I could see it. I could super see that as a possibility.
So let's change speeds and get on tonight's topic.
Okay.
Something we've been talking about for a while, but specifically here recently, a whole lot of theories going around with the paranormal Bigfoot stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes, in my opinion, infrasound, because while people report symptoms of infrasound in the Bigfoot community, I don't know of any stories firsthand where somebody has verified that they were face to face with a Bigfoot when it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And infrasound is just the theory to explain these mysterious symptoms that they feel while out in the woods in areas that supposedly have Bigfoot activity. Mm. And that includes me. It's something I've experienced myself. But you have an interesting theory, something that you brought to light, you suggested to me that I had never heard anybody else say before, which is with your paranormal investigating background, the symptoms of EMF are pretty much the same as the symptoms of infrasound exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And could these things be EMF related instead of infrasound? Where did you get that from? Was it just like an epiphany that you had?
Well, it was actually on one of your shows. It was, I don't know if you recall, I think it was Planet Fear. when we were doing Planet Fear. And I was talking with you and Lauren Smith, and we were talking about EMF and its reaction to people that I investigated with. And then we all kind of brought up that, hey, that sounds like infrasound. And, it had dawned on me. I said, man, because, I've, like you were saying earlier, I dipped my feet into paranormal. I've done, lots of cases, residential, commercial. I've done cemeteries, and then I've done, years and years of Bigfoot research. And as I've researched and I would interview people, I would go back. There's like 3 or 4 people that I've interviewed after I left the TBRC, and I went back to them and just casually, and I said, hey, when you were talking about your incident with me, how did you feel? I go, did you feel nauseated? Did you have a headache? Did you feel, obviously you felt fear, because most people feel that. And, all the 4 people that I talked to all talked about these symptoms. And I said, yeah, I did. I was nauseated, and I had an overwhelming sense of fear, of flight. And so now whenever I go in the field, I take a K2 meter with me. And anybody that doesn't know what a K2 meter, it measures EMF to up to 20 milligauss. And most readers, like the tri-state meter, I think it goes up to like almost like 200 or 150, but the K2 goes to like 20 milligauss. And if you do paranormal research, 5 milligauss is a lot.
Yeah.
So if you get bombarded with 5 milligauss, that's a lot. So 20 milligauss, man, you might throw up. So, but yeah, I think talking about that, I just, because I was in the field probably like a year ago. I was out, and Hallsville, and I had an experience like 10 years before that, and I went out there with 2 colleagues of mine, and there's granted, Matt, there's like no power lines, there's nothing around there. It's probably like, I don't know, a good 200 yards off the road, and there's nothing around there. And when I was walking around those woods, it was going off. It was pegging at 1920 milligauss, and there's no reason why it should be going. Granted, I was in like a cemetery, but it was like pegging at that. And in the past, we've had some Bigfoot activity out there, and so now whenever I want to go to the field or do something in the field, I take a K2 meter with me just in case.
I was in an area in eastern Texas, Angelina National Forest. Used to talk about this place a lot on older shows. We called it the Dead End Road.
Mm-hmm.
This place always creeped me out. It just always had a bad vibe to it. And there is some history to the place. There's an old sawmill in the area, and apparently they used to house slaves in the area right there close by, and there's a slave cemetery. Mm-hmm. In the area. I didn't know any of this at the time. This was all information that I found out later. But we went there for Bigfoot. That was our purpose. We were looking for Bigfoot. Right. And I was down there one time, and it was the last time I went down there. And I experienced what I believe was paranormal activity. I was seeing weird things. I saw I don't know how else to describe it, but like a phantom noose hanging from a tree limb. It was just kind of dropped down out of the sky. You could just kind of see it out of your peripheral vision every now and then. People were actually subconsciously ducking under it as they walked by it.
That's creepy.
Yeah. And then we had a trail cam, a motion sensing camera set up on one of the vehicles, like on the passenger side window facing the tree line. It was parked parallel to the tree line. And that was under the idea of like, if a Bigfoot approached from over there trying to hide behind the vehicle, the camera would go off. And this area is just pitch black. You know how it is in Texas at night. Mm-hmm. In some of those remote areas, like you can't see anything. It's like being in ink. And so it's pretty dark out there. I'm out there with a pretty good group of people, probably 8 to 10 of us. And I see someone, all I can see is like the silhouette of them because it's so dark, but they're on the opposite side of that vehicle, and they're walking down the side of it between the vehicle and the tree line, and they're getting ready to walk by the passenger window. And this, keep in mind, this is all happening very rapidly. It's, just a matter of seconds. And I had time to think, whoever that idiot is, they're getting ready to set off the flash on that camera. And they walked by the hood of the vehicle, right by the passenger window. They disappeared behind it. It was a large Suburban. I couldn't see once they got past the windshield, but the camera never went off. Nothing. And I mean, this was an upright human-shaped figure, whatever it was. Why it didn't set off the camera, I have no idea. Your guess is as good as mine. But that night, I started feeling the feelings of anxiety, nausea. I had a really bad headache. My energy just started draining. I just got really tired. It got to the point where I literally had to lay down in the back seat of one of the vehicles. And it eventually got so bad that I had to tell everybody, hey guys, I'm sorry. I got to leave. Like, we got to load up. I got to go back to the house. I'm sick. And that's hard to do on a Bigfoot outing, like
it is.
I'm pooping on the party, everybody. Sorry. And we all load up. We get in the vehicles. We drive down maybe a half mile. And after we got out of that area, I started feeling better. Everything just started going away. And for the next couple of days, I felt kind of drained, like if you've been like really physically exerting yourself, how you feel like the day after or whatever, besides the soreness, how your muscles are just kind of tired and everything. Mm-hmm. I felt like that for a couple of days. But yeah, I have no explanation. And in my mind, I got zapped. I mean, that's what everybody always called zapped by Bigfoot. I don't have another explanation for it. I don't know what it was.
I've heard that story from other people. Whenever I've interviewed them, they said as soon as I left the area, I felt fine, and I didn't think about it back then. And now that I think about it now, I said, man. So some of the people that I've actually still keep in contact with, because there's a few people that reached out to me about their Bigfoot incident, and I've walked them through and talked them through a lot of it. So I've heard that like so many times from people, and it's just kind of eerie irony,
Yeah.
to hear that.
So that area, like I said, was in a national forest. There's, to my knowledge, no power lines or anything like that around there. There's no reason why there would be any like EMF radiation or whatever it's called. But there was a different time in southern Oklahoma where we were out on this dirt road out in the middle of nowhere. I think they called it like Church Road or something because there was a little old church off in the woods. I don't even think anybody was using it anymore. But the people that we were with used to research in this area. It was supposedly a really good area. There's a little bridge there. Really creepy place. And that place, we were parked right underneath electric lines. Those big, huge cut-through electric lines. Mm-hmm. One of the people in the party had a night vision scope, and they were watching some figure that looked like it had a head and shoulders, kind of, I would say at about 2:00 from us, hiding behind like a thicket there, and it was off in an area that was just too thick for us to get to on the other side of barbed wire and everything else. And while that was happening, there was a dog with us, a German Shepherd, and the German Shepherd got freaked out, got back in the car, and anytime anybody got anywhere near the vehicle, it would start growling. It was clearly upset about something, completely out of its normal behavior. Mm-hmm. One of the individuals that was with us, a woman by the name of Kelly Mattingly, she used to be part of the research group I was with. She got extremely sick. Extremely, extremely, extremely sick. And like I said, we were right there at those huge power lines. So that area did have plenty of EMF, tons of it, and a possible Bigfoot too. So you know, it's something. If you don't mind, kind of go through the process of what you were saying about the electric lines of Bigfoot.
Well, I was talking on my last show, or second to the last show, with Felipe Mendoza. And I recall he had, whenever he was on your show, he was talking about the first time he was out, right? And he's talking about it whenever he was with his cousin Lupe and they were having his first experience. And I recall that was on a power line. And it just dawned on me. I said, you know what? I've heard many stories, and even whenever I did my own research, that's the first place we looked, is like electrical right-of-ways and gas right-of-ways, because my mentor Luke Gross always thought that was that they use that as a sidewalk to get through counties, and it's a lot easier. Game goes through there, Bigfoots go through there.
Yeah.
It makes sense just to walk through a clear-cut area. And I've heard I've heard many stories of people going to these areas and then getting chased out. And the theory that I had going off, the EMF infrasound, is that this electrical right away. What if Bigfoots are sensitive to it, and they use it as a tool or a weapon, or like they weaponize it. So if you're coming through their area, and they know that you're coming through it, they can just use that energy to bombard you with infrasound and get you spooked, and then run you out of there, so they don't have to do so much stuff. So I mean, that's one of the theories I had. I said, it just dawned on me to think of that. So, because like in paranormal stuff, like whenever I would go do a paranormal, whether it was residential or commercial, the first thing I would go look at, I would look at, number one, how old is the house? And whenever you say how old is a house, you can always like determine when it was built. And whenever it's built, they have sometimes they have poor wiring, or the wiring doesn't have a full, like a thick shield on most of the wiring, for the electrical. And so then I look for, where the power comes in from the telephone pole into the house, and then I look for like the breaker box. So these are the areas I look for. And once you find these areas, then, you kind of hear the stories. And a lot of the times, 90% of the time, they'll have these ghost appearances right in these areas. So the areas are like electrical hallway, or the area where the power comes into the house, or the breaker box. You'll see like apparitions, mist, and orbs and stuff on this area. So that kind of made sense about, the Bigfoot and the electrical right-of-way, because that whole area is just full of, I'm assuming it's bombarded with EMF or infrasound, and they probably can use one or the other and piggyback off the other.
So building off of that, if we're just looking at EMF, and low electronic frequencies and magnetic frequencies, those power lines would definitely put off some stuff, a lot of it. Also, any electronic device, if you're in an area such as the woods, where there's, nothing but nature, any sort of electronic device, if animals are sensitive to those fields, they're going to stand out like a beacon. Mm-hmm. So that means this might be an explanation as to why we don't have success very often with trail cams. These trail cams might be putting out some frequencies that these things either detect or at least feel, something stands out to them. Mm-hmm. And also it might, what you're saying about the electric lines, but also the electric lines might screw with them enough where they can't detect us, and that's why we end up seeing them in these areas.
Good point.
Because it kind of fogs, them being able to detect us. And I know that sounds like a bit of a reach, but I've been doing some research lately on this, mm-hmm. and there's a lot of research out there about animals detecting EMF and ELF, which, low frequencies, and every living creature puts them off. And a lot of popular theory is that animals can detect this. They can somehow sense it one way or another, including like humans putting it off. So an animal would literally be able to detect a human or a predator or anything else in the woods. Some animals even use it to their advantage for survival and hunting and stuff. So it's not just something that's completely unheard of.
You were, I'm going to go back a little bit when you were saying about, those game cams and stuff like that and how it was putting out frequency. When I was with the TBRC, we didn't have that many. And then whenever we did, because back then, like in 99, 2000, they were really like stupid expensive. And so we only had like 3 or 4 to put out. And then whenever we did, and we would get more activity, somebody had like a camcorder, like one of those small camcorders, the ones with the small tapes inside.
Yeah.
So we like put it like a cook of a tree, and we went back to go like look retrieve it and look at the video, and we would see somebody like throwing, like we could hear someone grunting, and then throwing sticks in front of it to see if it would flash, because like the old ones used to flash so often if that infrared beam was like broken.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had the idea that that these animals, these creatures could see it. So every time we would put it out, we would put these game cams up. We would put it out not to catch them, but to corral them into an area or get them not to be in this one area of the property.
Right.
So we can like corral them. Or I would just tell people, hey, if you don't want to see a Bigfoot behind your house, put these game cams behind your house. You can get them at Walmart or Kmart or wherever, and put some C batteries in it, and then problem solved. So we used to say that all the time, and I thought that was so odd how I didn't even think of that, about it would put off a frequency in that area, and they could probably see it and then avoid it.
Well, something in my own research days, I believe I had, and I get it, it's all conjecture and speculation, but I personally believe that whenever I started leaving my equipment at home or at camp and going out, I had way more success, way more activity, experienced way more things. Whenever I had all my electronic gear, my recording equipment, my video equipment and everything with me, nothing would happen.
Yeah.
So I think there might actually be something to this. and if you're a believer in synchronicity.
Yeah.
So check this out. Recently, a researcher down in Texas passed away by the name of Randy Edwards.
I heard, yeah.
I wasn't close to Randy. Friends of ours were, he was a really good guy. And I did have, a little bit of interaction with him on the internet. And, people pass away. If you're in this long enough, you're going to know somebody that passes away. So whenever that happens, if it's somebody I know, I go to my social media and I look on my private messages for the last conversation I had with them. So this past week, I did that with Randy. And the last conversation that we had, it was, man, a couple of years ago at least. And he was sending me a message saying, hey, I ran across this and I really think it would help the Bigfoot world. And it was a link to a brand of hunting attire called Hex. And this particular brand, the Hex brand of hunting gear, they make clothing for hunters. And it's basically clothing with a built-in Faraday cage that conceals your electronic field, your EMF that you put off as a human. And they've designed this clothing brand around the idea that, deer and other game animals can sense us and the electronic impulses that we put off, and that this will conceal that, or at least, damper it down enough to give us the advantage. And Randy thought, hey, I think Bigfoot can do this. And I think Bigfooters should start wearing this stuff and see if they have any more success with it. So I thought that was just pretty interesting, pretty neat.
Synchronicity at its finest.
Yeah.
I didn't know Randy either, man. I feel bad. I hear he's a good dude.
We also lost Claudia Ackley. That was a shocker. She was pretty famous in my circles in the Bigfoot world. She was out in California, I believe. She actually filed a lawsuit against the government about Bigfoot.
Nice.
Unsuccessfully. Her and her daughter, I believe it was, had a sighting, and she actually captured video of the Bigfoot. And some weird stuff happened. Some Men in Black stuff happened. Strangers showing up at her house. Weird stuff, man.
I was going to mention also Rex Gilroy from Australia passed away about 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I've had some interactions with Rex back in like the late 90s and early 2000s. And he was probably one of the first people to research and the Yowie and bring it out to like the media and the newspapers and get it on TV and stuff. So he's one of the people in Australia that I looked up to and corresponded with. And this was back then. I'm going to date myself a little bit here. Probably this was probably on Yahoo e-groups.
Oh, wow.
When I first, it was what's that other one called? Fire something? I can't remember it. So I think I reached him on there, and then we corresponded on Yahoo e-groups because he had like a Yowie one, and but yeah, he passed away like 5 weeks ago. So I just wanted to mention that.
Too many good ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, if anybody's out there listening, if you're a hunter and you happen to use the hex gear, I'd love to hear about it. Or if any Bigfooters out there want to give it a shot and let us know how it goes, that would be great. Because I'd be very interested, because you could even just like buy some of this fabric maybe and, use it as a covering for your trail cam and see if that helps anything. Who knows?
Yeah.
At this point, we got to start thinking outside the box, man.
Absolutely. I mean, because there's too many changes and it's so accessible now with, the internet and cell phones and stuff like that. It's just it's a matter of time before someone catches something really good that you can't refute or debunk or anything like that. But I'm excited.
Yeah, I do think that there's some good stuff out there. I think it, just like anything else, even the good stuff gets just torn apart online like anything does.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, at this point, it's all just been random chance and just luck that's caused those things to happen. I don't feel like the Bigfoot research community, if that's, how you want to label it, has really made any progress. I see a lot of the same ideas being repeated over and over, as new people come along and, they don't know the history or they haven't been around that long and they come up with these new ideas, but it's still stuff that's already been tried. And that doesn't mean they shouldn't try it. Just because one person tried it 20 years ago doesn't mean it wouldn't work for someone else.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any such thing as a bad idea at this point. I think everything should be on the table.
Let me ask you a question. Do you get messages with ideas such as this?
Every now and then. Every now and then.
Yeah.
I would say just about every single time that somebody has messaged me with an idea, it's been something that's already been done.
Yeah, same.
I hear a lot of people talk about how, in my approach, I wanted to do something that had never been done before. I wanted to do things differently. And then they talk about what they're doing, and it's the exact same thing that people were doing 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. I get that a lot too. I get a couple of things and not that it's bad or I'm not saying people shouldn't reach out, to me or you. I think it's good. And, I critique it in a way where it's constructive, so I say that's good. You should, what's your goal? What's your goal in this? What's your plan? Cause that's usually what I end up asking them. I go, what's your goal? You want to have an experience? You want to document stuff? What's the plan? So I know. I still get some of that, and it keeps me thinking too. It keeps me thinking, and it keeps me like involved. And I don't go to the woods as much as I want to anymore. But if anybody were to ask like myself or you for help, I'm sure we would help them without a doubt.
Oh yeah, doors always open, of course. Speaking of the future and plans and goals, what do you got coming up with Bigfoot Club?
Bigfoot Club. It's funny. I was on, because Steven does the streaming for his video game stuff, and we were streaming with this other guy, and he saw my name because I'm on Twitch as same Bigfoot Club 1, and he saw my name on there. And he asked me the question about Bigfoot, and then he stopped the stream for like an hour, and he explained to me how he had his experience in Ontario at his vacation home, and he's explaining everything to me. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, do you want to come on the show and talk about your show? Talk about your incident." So he's going to be coming on. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Smash.
Lieutenant Colonel Smash.
He has a great voice, so he's coming on. I'm going to do that. There's a couple of comic book people that are doing cryptid comics that I'm reaching out to. I haven't got an okay yet from them to come on yet. But I've been reaching out. So that's what I got going on. So I don't really have a big list of people, because me, I tend to choose people that normally wouldn't come on a podcast. So that's where I find interesting stories, and because like part of it is just stories. I love to hear stories from people, whether they're interested in Bigfoot, whether they had a Bigfoot experience, what's driving people to stay on this Bigfoot subject. So I mean that's what I find more interesting than anything.
Well, man, I appreciate you hopping on here with me. I just wanted to put out basically a filler show. I've been gone for so long with the internet loss and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I've got quite a few guests lined up in the chute ready to go, but that's going to be in the very near future. But I thought this was an interesting enough theory to throw out there, something for people to think about, maybe some Bigfooters, if anybody actually goes out in the field, if you're listening. Maybe befriend some of the paranormal folks and invite them out in the woods with you and tell them to bring their equipment and see what you find. See if you get any success with it.
See what happens.
And if you've had your own encounter with something you can't explain, feel free to email me at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com, where you can find links to the social media, merchandise, and a contact form to reach me directly. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.